Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 64 of the Future of Work show, where we discuss ideas that are changing the world. For those of you who've been following us, you know that we've been doing a series on AI and culture. And today is the fourth episode in that series. We've tried to do a mix of academics and practitioners, certainly people who are doing amazing work in the area of AI culture implementation. And today I have with me a very special guest, Dr. Neha Shah, who is a principal applied scientist at Microsoft Viva. She's going to speak about her own research on AI and productivity. And let me share that Neha and I were also PhD batchmates. So, we share that special extra bond. With that, let me bring Neha on. Hi, Neha.
Hello. 60 episodes, 60 plus episodes.
Oh,
Fantastic. I'm so
I
proud just to hear that. Congratulations.
I mean, I know I had you on the show, I think maybe some 30, 40 episodes ago. We did one on organizational network analysis, and I know that a lot of people really loved that conversation.
Thank you.
For many people, that was the first time they were being exposed to the idea of organizational network analysis. And I still remember that, when we were doing a PhD together, how fascinated I was with the work that you're doing. And I'm so impressed that, you're still at it, research different ways. And I know you're going to speak today about some of your latest research on AI and productivity. I have to say, this is an area that I'm super, super curious about and can't wait to hear more.
Yay. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here and happy just to catch up with you.
We have to do a separate one, just you and me,
Yeah,
chit
perfect.
chat.
Perfect.
One of the things I wanted to share, Nia, is that my organization, Uncube, we actually help leaders become future ready by helping them be exposed to ideas that are really current and at the cutting edge. We also help them, with developing capabilities within their organization so that uh, their organization is much more future ready. So, the conversation we're going to have today really fits into that. Parallelly, me and a collaborator, Jaspreet Bindra, have been doing a study on AI and culture and how the two connect. So, can't wait to hear what you have to say on
And
this.
vice versa, actually. Maybe I should be interviewing you. It's fascinating everything you just
Yes,
mentioned.
another episode. So, now tell me a little bit about how much of a game changer do you personally think AI is going to be?
Yeah. So let me caveat anything I say with anything that I say is sort of my opinion, not that of Microsoft. And so I'm here as my own representative. Um, Having said that, I think it's going to be a big game changer. I think the way that we work independently, the way that we work with others, I think that's fundamentally going to change in a way that's fascinating. And look, I think we're in the first stages of what these changes are going to be. So some of them we could conceptualize, and some of them are going to evolve as we grow and learn. And I think this is true of any technological advancement that we've seen in the past industrial revolution, for the internet. And unfortunately, you and I are both old enough to have experienced that revolution. um, but having lived through that, what initially looked like the changes are so much different than even what we see now. And so I anticipate that being true of AI and productivity and the way that we work and the way that we do our jobs, the way that we work with others. I think all of those things are really going to change in interesting ways. The first step that I think is probably going to be the hardest is how we change the way that we manage. And I haven't heard a lot of people talking about that, but to me that's such an interesting part of the way that we work. I think you and I have both looked at research of why people leave their organizations, and rarely is it because of the job that they're doing. More often than not, it's because of the people that they work with and their manager, right, or their supervisor. And so, as we're thinking about AI and productivity, what a fascinating shift that's going to have in how we have to learn how we manage people in a different way. And we've come through that a little bit, that little bit of a change in remote work. So through the pandemic, we've seen that people have had to really adapt to managing people in a way that they never had to before.
Yeah.
And that may, I don't, again, this is my own opinion, but that may drive some of the push to return people to the workplace. Because if you're here, I can see you, and in some ways feel as though I have some control over the way that you're working and your own productivity for my employees. Now I think that's going to then take the next step is how do we manage and how do we lead when AI is at the forefront? How are we going to think about people using AI in their work or not using AI in their work? How are we going to think about leading or managing with more data than we've ever had before? There's a lot of fantastic questions, and I'm sure you've started to think about these from a cultural perspective as well. I'm interested to know what have you thought about on this?
Actually, I'm really interested that you spoke about leadership being different because you're right. That's not something that's spoken about very often. And, to your example of how the pandemic shifted leadership, and then at least in India, we almost saw a reaction back with, I would say by now, maybe the majority of organizations feeling uncomfortable not having people right in front of them. And despite the research evidence, and Professor Nicholas Bloom at Stanford keeps publishing
Yeah.
his studies on how it impacts productivity and culture, but despite all of that, I think the shift surprisingly didn't hold as much as I thought it would. And we saw so many managers just mandate return to office, arrangements. And um, while our own research at Uncube always shows that the flexibility to work is in the top three of what people are looking for,
Hmm.
what we've seen is that the dynamic of the job market has really influenced whether people are able to exercise that preference or not. And while in the tech industry and in some roles there is more flexibility, but in other industries, a lot of maybe the gains made during the pandemic have sort of gone back. It was a little bit of a surprise to me, I have to say.
Yeah,
So
and I think there's a question of why is that? Why have those gains gone back? And then as we're looking forward to the next shift, this next change into AI, how are we going to adapt? And what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be thinking about from a leadership perspective, and then cascading through to a managing perspective? What new skill sets do people need to develop? And there's been, skills are obviously at the forefront of everybody's discussions of,
yeah.
people are going to need to develop new skills. There's going to be these changes of how people work and what they do. And yet there's this, um, I think, impetus for leaders to develop a skill set that maybe wasn't as strong before. And I think of the IT leader, right? So for the IT leader, historically, going back a generation, there's a big focus on security and performance. Just keep the lights on, man. Just keep the lights on. Make sure that nothing's happening. Security now and the threats to security obviously are increasing. But now there's this focus, especially with AI, to be thinking about innovation and growth, and not for only the business leaders or sales leaders, but IT indeed to be driving that. And that means that the leadership from the CEO to the whoever the IT leaders are, whether that's the CIO or chief data officer or what have you, um, suddenly there's capabilities that need to come into play, not only understanding this new technology, but also having influence capabilities to be able to connect with different parts of the organization and be able to drive change in ways that are productive. So, that's such a small piece of the type of capability that needs to change on an executive level. And certainly that needs to cascade down through, right? We all will start to need to speak languages, so to say, that we haven't before. So that IT leader will need to speak sales and have a connection with customers, increasingly so, even for those who have this deep connection and understand the problem that sales leaders face or that customers are needing. Likely that's going to just expand and expand and expand, and that will grow to finance, to legal, to all of these different aspects of the company, and then to the business lines and product leaders as well.
It's
So
so interesting that, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
no, I'm fascinated by it, and I suspect you are too, knowing where we intersect.
It's so interesting you say that, because you spoke about multiple languages. Actually, when we work on this whole piece of what are future ready capabilities, we call it being multilingual.
Yeah.
Because just like you said, today, if you're a senior leader, you can't be successful if you just speak your functional language. Those days are long gone. They've been gone for a while. But what we're seeing as being very primary to your own success in the role is the ability to connect dots in ways that you never needed to in the past, whether that's internally within the organization, speaking, as you said, the language of different functions, technology, sales, finance, uh, the people function, or it's even externally, being able to speak the language of your clients, of your companies like yourself. I don't want to say competition, but that's true. So it's like your ability to switch languages and mindsets that go with those languages, based on what's needed in the moment. And that requires a mental agility that is at a much higher level than leaders have traditionally needed.
Hmm.
Uh, and in our own research, one of the things we're seeing as being so central to leaders who are ahead of the curve, in business leaders who are ahead of the curve in implementing AI technology, is this multilingual capacity. They speak the language of data, they speak the language of technology, and of course, whatever function they represent, and of course, the business and the industry. So that, just putting it all together to explore what this new technology can offer. That's such a fascinating skill, right? Who would have thought of that?
It's a skill, and as you were talking about all of these different things that need to come together, I was thinking of somebody who occupies that role and thinking, my God, that's a lot, right? That's a
It's a
lot.
lot.
It's a lot to bring together, and it's a lot to integrate, and so it can't be just one person who has to do all of that, right? I think it's going to have to be the teams, the IT organization as a whole is going to have to be able to speak these multiple languages.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be an increased reliance on people and managing people and working with people and thinking about how they connect in ways that exceed how we've thought about people management in the past. I think that there's this, HR, in the same way that we thought of IT keeps our systems running and keeps us secure in that old way of thinking. In that same old way of thinking, there's HR handles people. And
Yeah.
and so much of looking forward to how will AI be successful? How can companies transform through with AI? And it's got to be taking into account the way that people work, how we communicate, how leaders communicate with people, how we measure the sentiment of how people are feeling about their work, how we measure the way that they're actually collaborating, how we measure the goals that they have, for example, and their progress towards goals, and how they're working with other teams across the organization to do that. what's going to be really interesting is, I don't know, to me, this point in time capability, right? Because things are changing so fast. We've in the past had the luxury of saying, let's see how things go, and we'll measure every 6 months, and if they didn't work, we'll course correct. And it's sort of this lagging indicator. I don't see that being feasible anymore. I think now data, just like bringing data together, for AI to be successful, and to create the competitive advantage that everybody's seeking, that same data capability is going to have to be used to think about, how do we get ahead of business problems before they occur? How do we make sure that the right people are communicating together? How do we make sure that people aren't burnt out? All of these things, I think, that fit into your work on culture, I suspect,
Yeah.
are, from a data perspective, going to become more and more and more important, as we move forward with transformation here.
So interesting you say that, Neha, because we are seeing that organizations that are ahead of the curve tend to be data centric. That's part of their DNA. They get it, they get how to use data, they look to data to answer questions.
Hmm.
And they're also very comfortable with this. Let's try something today, let's evaluate it tomorrow. So the 6 months horizon, I think, is now long gone. I had on my show a few weeks ago the head of the global AI cell of PwC, and he spoke about how some of their early projects were 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's it. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, that's it's so interesting that that's the pace we're talking about. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, build a tool, that's going to help the business or even help their clients and move ahead. In fact, some of their award-winning tools were built primarily in a hackathon. So one
Yeah.
weekend.
Oh, that's interesting.
So see, that's the amazing part. So the pace of change is. I love what you said, the moment in time idea,
Yeah.
because that's so true. It's one fundamental question is, how do you even keep pace with what technology can do today? Because it's going to be different tomorrow, and it's going to be different next week for sure. So we've never lived in such a fluid world. And when you were saying that it's the ask from senior leaders seems almost overwhelming, I have to agree. I
Yeah.
actually have to agree, I think it is. And the capacity to keep pace with technology is and be multilingual is only one of many new emerging competencies. It's only one, which is why for senior leaders, I mean, I have a lot of empathy for the fact that they have extremely demanding jobs, but they almost have a second full-time job, which is just
Learning.
developing this new set of skills. It's a lot. It's
Yeah.
really a lot. So let me ask you now, based on your research, what are you finding as the link between AI and productivity?
Yeah. So it's not my research. I will confess that my role is in doing applied research. So I get to think about what research is out there, what research we do at Microsoft, and think about, how do we build that into the products that we develop, and make sure that what we're doing is really science backed. It's a really fun role to be in, because I get to straddle academics and practice,
Love
right?
it.
Really cool. Um, but I think we've done some really cool work, thinking about AI and productivity. And, we started initially with thinking about lab experiments, and thinking about, how is it that AI is going to impact the way that people do their tasks in labs. And that's starting to, more increasingly, we are focused on, how is AI actually impacting the way that people work. And so, Microsoft has a work trend index that has recently published something, like, there was a paper recently about 11 by 11. And that showed that, the people that seem to get the most benefit from AI tend to use it at least 11 minutes a day, and tend to use it for 11 weeks. And that's, I think what that reflects is this need to give people space to adopt technology. Um, one making sense here, but one of the things that leaders are often in a rush to do to say is, I've got this new technology. What's the value of it? Let's measure the value of it, which is rightfully so. But there's also a need to step back and say, well, are people using it? How can we help people to see the value of this to their own work? And there are fears in some cases. And again, this kind of goes back to that managing situation of like, is it okay with my manager if I use AI? Should I be using AI in my role? Where should I be using AI? How should I be using AI? And so there's a lot about, one, there's obviously a lot about learning, but there's also, again, that making it safe, safe to use AI and to gain the benefits from it, but also to do it on a consistent basis. So that 11 by 11 article really talked about that need to be consistent with the way that we're using it. And when people do, they experience benefits and report doing that.
I love how catchy that is, 11 by 11,
Yeah,
11
I
minutes,
the
11
link
weeks. It's,
to
it's
share.
really nice. It's really nice. And, now I'm going to connect that with something that Andrew Ng said in one of his talks, that AI is different from other technologies because he felt that it doesn't make sense to dive straight into developing an AI strategy. In order to be able to do that well, you first need to spend time playing with AI, almost sandboxing it, getting comfortable, understanding how it works, developing I mean, literacy is a very technical word, but like developing a friendly relationship with AI, and that precedes what you would typically expect, right? What's my AI strategy? What's going to be my ROI? Just like you said,
Yeah.
it precedes answering some of those questions. So, in fact, his suggestion was that even if the first few things you're working on aren't life changing, they're important because they help people, senior leaders in particular, just get comfortable,
Yes.
just develop that relationship with AI. So, can I just ask you, now since you brought it up, what do you see as the hopes and fears that teams have around AI?
Oh, I don't know what the hopes and fears are. I think I think the I mean some of them we've talked about, right? I think there's this hope that AI is really going to help with productivity. I think it's going to help people. There's a hope, and we see this panning out in the data that it's helping people make work faster with in a speedier way, in a more effective way, in a more accurate way. Uh, I think there's a hope too that it will have an impact on effort, that it'll make work easier for people. And so, in some ways, these are sort of the hallmark definitions of productivity. Um, I suspect there's fears of almost from the top of the organization down in the way that you described. There's this all-encompassing fear, I think, in so many large organizations right now, of just trying to stay in front of their competitor. And are we going to be able to do it?
Yeah.
And I don't mean just from a technology perspective, but are we going to be able to serve our customers better than our competitor can? Are we going to be able to have supply chains that are as effective as our competitors? Everything. Are we going to be legally ahead of our competitors in terms of, I don't know if you can legally be ahead of competitors, but there's I don't know. I suspect do you see that with the companies that you're talking with as
Oh,
well?
absolutely. I think today there is in almost every well-run organization, a realization that it's not easy. It's not easy. Just staying where you are is not easy.
Yeah.
You have to work so much harder to stay where you are because um, technologies like AI, and AI in particular, uh, they're potentially extremely disruptive. And we do know, and I'm sure you've come across that research, that it's actually companies which are focused on value discovery rather than just driving efficiency, who are making the largest gains. Because, as you said, it's about how can I serve my customer better, you know. So anyone who finds better answers to that and does so far ahead or much sooner than their competitors is creating a gap that's not going to be easy to catch up to, because
It's a
we
tall
are
order,
already
right?
that much ahead.
It's a tall order because you're saying, hey, full company, you are now tasked with
Yeah.
growth and innovation. I don't care what role you're in. Yes,
Yes.
you need to work as efficiently as you can and
Yes.
use the capabilities that that AI exceedingly can provide to help you be efficient. And now you need to think about how can you be as innovative as you can be.
Yes.
And that,
All
that
on.
that's I don't know. That's really neat. I think. And I don't know for I think for nerds like myself, I think that that's really neat because it creates an opportunity for everybody throughout the organization to say, how can we make this not only better, but how can we make this different in a way that's going to create some advantage for us? Who should I be talking to across the company to help me learn things in ways that I haven't learned before? What sorts of learning should I do outside of this organization? And you talked about it from the executive perspective of executives need to not only understand their own roles, but also those of others. Maybe what you and I are getting to is that needs to cascade down to everybody throughout the organization to say, what is your role and how can your role, what is the next thing going to be for your role or the product that you're working in, and how are you going to find that? Where are those pockets of knowledge that you may not naturally access, that
Yeah.
you need to access, those languages that you don't speak,
Yeah.
that where you could find those gains. And to me, that's a really cool problem.
It is, isn't it? I mean, essentially, what we're saying is value discovery is now everyone's business. It
Yeah,
is, and in one of the organizations who's really at the forefront of this, I found that the way they did this, because as you said, this is a pretty tough problem to crack, is that they decided they're going to do AI literacy for like 6 months, seminar after seminar, talk after talk, and mass, so that everybody has an opportunity to understand. And then they set up a show and tell lab,
yeah,
physical space where you can come and see examples, and you were encouraged to, okay, think about, okay, in fact, they even classified the kinds of problems that you could potentially solve using their technology lab
oh,
in
that's
11 or 12 categories, so that no matter which function you were part of, you could begin to think of, okay, where's the value for me? Whether it's HR, whether it's finance, I mean, irrespective of function, right? It's a potentially infinite use cases. So it's like, where's the value for me? So they created this whole toolkit to help not just business leaders, but people across levels think of what's the value discovery here for my function. It's pretty neat.
how was that received? How do you think that impacted the way that
Very, very well. We actually interviewed people who are from the business functions as well. And of course, we interviewed those who were ahead of the curve in the
yeah,
business functions.
yeah,
But they were super excited. I think it's been for a certain kind of person, and that's the person who, uh, probably always had a desire to be creative and innovative, and maybe
yeah,
there weren't enough platforms. For that person, for someone who loves data, who loves doing new things, who loves playing with new ideas and trying out new things, I think this is an amazing time, actually.
yeah,
uh,
yeah. I haven't seen and I'm sure it exists on research on personality traits
yeah.
and
Yeah.
the response to AI in companies. But I
Yeah.
can imagine there being some really interesting connections between
Yeah.
willingness to experiment, willingness to be innovative, willingness to potentially take risks, but with data, right? So it's in
Yeah.
I don't know. We get to nerd out about it, you and I, but it's a really
Yeah,
for those of us who study organizations and work, and it's a fascinating time to be a part of
fascinating.
this. Yeah.
So what we are finding for organizations which are really ahead of the curve, of course, they love data, they love their customer. So, their focus is customer. Very much, uh, how do we get better customer insights? And that could be anything. It could be right from how do we do a better segmentation of our customers to how do we know, and this is true of one of the organizations in our study, how do we know on a daily basis what customer service complaints are saying in North India, South India, West India? Can we segment them? Can we get a sense of how it's an auto company, how our product is doing, across different regions? Um, we also see that there are organizations who have the skills because of practice, and all of these are learned skills of very quick experiments.
Mm,
So let's just try something today, and there's absolutely there's no risk associated with the failure because it's just a learning. So let's quickly learn, let's quickly move, and time is weeks. Time is weeks. um, you know, Ashi, my daughter. So she works in a tech-based company as well, and you know, she says, "Of course, Mama. It's in days for us."
yeah.
So the time cycles have shifted so dramatically,
Yeah.
and this whole piece of data driving insights, technology, using those insights for being able to serve your customer even more sharply, that cycle is a really fast one now, whether it's a product based company or whether it's even manufacturing. Some of the companies we're studying are actually in manufacturing, so it's super exciting.
It makes me realize that, as we're talking about AI transformation, um, there's this there is this broad company-wide view of AI transformation, but so much of this change is going to happen in small scales, and in a small scale, and it needs to happen in a small scale
Yes.
because it means that we need to try things, see how they go in a small scale, and then we can expand it out to the company. And so there's this interesting tension between what do we have to do at an all up level? And I think AI literacy is probably one of those things that we have to start saying at an all up level, let's start creating these larger interventions so that people do understand what it is, do begin to experiment with it, and so start to see the value that it can provide to them personally, but also to the teams that they're in and the organizations that they're in. But then as we're thinking about, the change that can arise, what are the small things that we should try? And so there's for leader again, man, we are, I think we're just piling it on for for leaders today.
Don't forget that we are also part of that.
Yeah,
The leaders
well,
we're talking about are us as well.
it makes the change be not something, actually, I think let's take this off for execs, right? It makes change be not something only that executives are culpable for, right?
Yes.
But it makes change, and not something only that has to be purely bottoms up, but something that managers can really be driving. And
Yes.
that so that now we're talking about AI transformation being an incredibly systemic thing, where yes, leadership has to be transparent, has to share the information, has to communicate the vision. People have to be interested in it and changing their skills and thinking about their own networks. But then there's this middle layer, which I think is going to have an incredibly powerful voice of saying, what are the things that we're trying, and how can we communicate that to our friends in other parts of the company so that they can take those learnings, and how do we cascade that up and down the hierarchy?
I
And
love
so
that.
that's a
I
lot
love
of that requires a fundamentally connected organization. Even more
Yes.
so, let's get back to organizational networks. I love we're all roads lead.
Yeah.
Between your change and my research on networks, I think we keep
We have to write a blog post or an article now.
absolutely,
That's for sure.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and I love the way you say it because there's some things that have to happen right from the top, like a mandate. And organizations that are ahead of the curve, there's been a systemic mandate that we're going to leverage AI as a technology. And typically that means AI literacy for a very wide section of the organization. It also often means a sort of show and tell lab
Hmm.
because for a lot of people, they need that experimentation to think of, okay, how can I use this to my benefit? So some place they can go virtual or physical to experiment with ideas. uh, and once you do that, then it's a question of unleashing the process of creativity itself, encouraging people to make the kind of connections that you said, right, across the organization, use data, run small scale experiments, and see what happens. And
Mm.
many of the small scale experiments, uh, become big within weeks. So that's
How do
the
you
interesting thing.
how do you see that changing? So we're talking about it. I can imagine somebody watching this saying, "My God, that these two are so idealistic." And so, thinking that way, I'm wondering, you know, it seems as though there's also going to have to be changes to how we're measured as well, right? And so, what does top performance mean? Because historically, risk taking in some roles was built in, but in other roles wasn't, or in other organizations or in other cultures. And so I think as the culture will need to change, and as this change and this transformation has to happen again, up, down, and all the way across, it also means that our formal systems need to change. How people are rewarded is going to need to change as well. Have you seen this in the work that you're doing as well?
100%, Neha,
Yeah.
100%. In fact, we're working with a very large and extremely successful, deep legacy manufacturing organization as one of our clients. Um, and we are seeing that one of the critical criteria for rising to top leadership positions is this: what's the entrepreneurial DNA that you have? What's your capacity to connect emerging ideas with the work that you do? Now, none of this was ever needed in the past, right? But today, if you're not able to do that, it's I mean, most organizations don't perhaps articulate it as clearly as they've done, but
Yeah.
that's the truth. If you
Yeah.
can't do that, you're never going to be under serious consideration for top leadership roles, because it is about connecting possibilities in the outside with, okay, so what does that mean for me? And that's a filter that they are very systematically using for selecting their top leaders at this point. And of course, it makes absolute sense to do so. So I think we're going to see that be as critical a filter as perhaps some years ago, just simply being able to manage a large organization was.
Yeah.
Uh, Today, I think it's about can you how well do you understand change, and what's your entrepreneurial instinct with
Oh,
change? What's
interesting.
your capacity to spot opportunities that are opening up because of some of these changes?
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting as researchers are thinking about how can we measure that,
Yeah.
right? And so how do we measure it in a way uh, that ensures that we don't? I think we were getting to a place where we were taking bias out of, uh, hiring to some degree, and performance measurement to some degree, because we were going away from it being somebody's gut reaction, right? Um, And so now we're going to have to think about how can we measure that so that it is codified in people's
Yeah.
job descriptions, and the way that they are identified as high performers, the way that they're rewarded, and the way that they get chosen for progression, so that that sense of fairness that innately drives all of us
Yeah,
is
yeah,
retained.
absolutely. And I think a whole suite of assessment tools for future readiness is going to emerge. It's right there. We're right there.
Yeah.
At this point, we're still relying on, behavioral event interviews, 360-degree feedback, your actual use cases of innovation, say in the last couple of years. So, we're relying on stuff like that, traditional tools. But I think this is something that I expect is just going to emerge out of this new problem, that how do we measure future readiness, which is really this ability to explore opportunity and spot opportunity, and then very quickly be able to bring it into your part of the organization. It's not just identifying, but okay, I've made this change because I'm tracking whatever AI, and of course, depending on your industry, a whole suite of technologies, and I can see, okay, this is another way to use this. That's another way to use this. So the future readiness suite of skills is so, so, so different.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
very, very different from anything.
I hadn't thought about that. I really like that idea of being able to uh, identify a new opportunity and to implement it. Those are two different skills, right?
Yeah,
But
it's a different
um,
skill.
that I agree with you. I think that that's really going to drive
Yeah.
success in this new world.
Yes.
Um, Again, let's start. Go back to where we started. Is so how do we teach managers to help their teams identify those opportunities? How do we
Yeah.
help them to help their teams implement quickly, even if it's something that they haven't done before? How do we give them comfort with risk, and how do we make that a part of the culture?
Yeah.
These are some really, I think, going to be central questions that will
100%.
make people a more focal part of the way that we do business than we had before, which I think to you and me always sounded sort of ridiculous, that people were this afterthought to, okay, this is our plan, this is, operations, this, and then there's people. And yes, we've cared about their well-being, but now the way that people work independently and work together fundamentally is going to drive that competitive advantage.
Yes. Yes. I'm so happy you say that because, for so long, our focus was employee engagement and, is this a good place to work or a great place to work or, some measure of that.
Right.
And I'm not saying that it doesn't have relevance, but
Yes.
that's so foundational
Yeah.
because today, if you want to be cutting edge, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You need to have the capacity to innovate.
Yeah.
And if you want to lead innovation, you need very different skill sets within your team. You
Yeah.
need that, you know, you need them to be practiced at innovation, whatever be the tools or methods that they're using. You need them to be practiced with, running experiments, learning from experiments. You need them to be practiced with, let's do this by the evening. So
Yeah.
there's so many of these sub skills, and you cannot run a successful team like that with traditional leadership styles. You just
Yes.
can't. It
Yeah.
needs
I
a
agree.
very different environment. It needs an environment which is psychologically safe, where learning, experimentation, exchange of ideas, ideas not having boundaries just within your team, but across teams with the external world. You need much more porous borders with the
Yes.
external world because if there's it's you just can't be insular in any way anymore. You just
Yeah.
can't. Being insular is like, okay, you are left in the past. So it's a very different form of organization.
And I don't, I've heard this porous borders comment widely now, and I've heard it, from those who work with leadership across
Yeah,
a variety of organizations. And it's not just internally, right? So
yeah,
not only do you need to have these cross-cutting networks internally, you need to also think about these porous borders with partners, with consulting firms,
yeah.
for example, with our suppliers. We need to, because the better we understand what's happening there, the better
Exactly. Yeah.
we can create the innovation. So you know, I, as you were talking, I was thinking back to your research on complexity. And
Oh
I
my
think,
goodness. Yeah,
you
that's
know,
so true.
and 20 years you've been thinking about complexity, and I've been thinking about networks. And, you know, now, and it's hurting me to say this because you and I, you know, we look so young. Uh, 20 years ago, we started thinking about this idea, and man, now we've really come to a head where
Yeah,
complexity is just understanding that, and almost being able to harness it,
yeah,
and being able to harness it with the networks is
yes,
really, I think, going to drive advantages in ways that hadn't existed before. Then
yeah,
that complexity, because, you know, before we thought about it, well, it comes from technological changes, great, and we have to adapt to that. Or there's going to be changes in the macroeconomic condition, we've got to, you know, adapt to that. Or there's going to be changes in, you know, the world scale, where there may be wars, or where there may be, you know, successes. And all of those things, that means this organization and the leaders, and all the way again down through the organization, has to be constantly responding in a way that change is continuous, and not just technological change. All these different types of change are continuous. And so attaining a competitive advantage is going to require such a fundamental understanding of everything. And so I think, and maybe that's why AI is going to become even more valuable, because it allows this perspective to help to say, hey, I need to learn about this. I need to learn about it quickly.
yeah.
How do I do that? You know, at the very simplest capabilities of AI.
I love the way you've put that across because just think about it, Neha. Think about what it means if you're a leader. I mean, we spoke about the mental agility you need to travel across different worlds, speak the different languages which different parts of your organization, external world, speak all those languages. But there's an emotional component and a component of social intelligence as well. It's like, how do you build those bridges, bonds?
Yeah.
How do you build those connections so that you're able to find solutions that did not exist yesterday?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you're able to collaborate in ways that are you've never needed to. So
Yeah.
collaboration intensity is actually one of the future ready competencies we are finding in organizations. What's your collaboration intensity? How quick are you to go across borders and come up with
Oh, yeah,
a
right.
new way to discover value,
Uh-huh.
whether it's internal, whether it's external. Um just like innovation is your capacity to build innovation spaces within your organization. And today it's not innovation as a function, even though you might have innovation as R&D as one function, but that's only one very small kind of innovation. The true value discovery resides everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a very different set of skills that we're finding is going to be the winning combination from here on.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think that we have to rely on gut feelings for any of this anymore, right? And I'll sort of give my team at Microsoft a shameless plug. We can measure networks, we can measure cross collaboration, and so we can start to see where are dependencies, and where might there be needs that we need to increase intensity, to be more successful. And so we can see that on a nearly weekly basis and act on it, versus waiting to see when failure occurs. So I think there's a lot of, again, a lot of evidence and data that we can bring to the table to help make our moves informed, rather than being based on gut instinct or hoping that we know what's happening under the hood of the organization.
Absolutely love that. I also realize we're almost at the end of our time. So, Neha,
You and I can
anything?
go for hours and hours.
Me too. Anything that you want our viewers to like leave with, any core ideas around AI productivity or AI for themselves as individuals?
Well, I think you and I have talked just a lot about experimentation. I think experimentation is going to be super important. So for yourself, if you're new to AI, if you're new to all of this, try it. Try it to do the things that you need to do at work. Try to summarize your emails, or try to, summarize a meeting, or do these very simple things, and expand what you do. Do it on a consistent basis and see how it helps you get your work done in a more effective way and being more productive. And then also start thinking about, what does it mean about the way that you collaborate outside outside of yourself. So what does it mean about the way that you work with others? How does it impact the way that you work across your organization? And I think we've sort of beat this dead horse, so to say, but we've really talked a lot about innovation is going to be something that is the mandate of every employee, rather than being the mandate of an R&D organization or the mandate of an executive alone.
So well said, Neha. And I'm going to actually, remind our viewers of the 11 by 11 equation that Neha spoke about. It's just such a nice, catchy way, 11 minutes a day for 11 weeks. And I think you're right. Start with whatever's simplest to you, whether it's summarizing your emails or uh, help with presentations or anything else, whatever you think is going to be helpful for you, and take it on from there. As Neha said, expectations from all of us are changing. And I don't think there's any doubt that people who are adept at using AI are absolutely going to be far ahead in this race. Hate to say race, but far ahead in their productivity or in their capacity to just simply do stuff and come up with innovation than those who aren't. So,
Yeah.
on that note, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. And for those of you who are interested in this series on AI and culture, do stay tuned. We have a few really interesting speakers coming up who are going to just explore this whole angle of AI implementation in so many different ways.
Thank you.